Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure unto the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. The second woe or destruction is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And in the scriptures, and specifically in the book of Revelations, you've got three woes, which is representing the three world wars. Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So that first woe would have been World War I, the second woe, which is past, World War II, and of course, the third woe coming quickly, being World War III. And we can clearly see that, hey, we are at the door of World War III, fully taking place. You've got that situation going on over in Ukraine, and now you've got situation between China and Taiwan, and then especially now that situation in the so-called Middle East right now, which is really Western Asia, with the state of Israel and Hamas. And now you've got Israel, making threats to Hezbollah and Lebanon. Israel has done airstrikes in Syria, and Israel and the U.S. are claiming that Iran had something to do with backing Hamas's recent attack in Israel. And then at the same time, you have Iran saying that if Israel goes into the Gaza Strip, hey, they're going to get involved in some form or capacity. And then also you've got the U.S. moving even more military assets into that Middle Eastern region. All the pieces are being set in place, for the final, the final confrontation, the culmination of World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon in Joel chapter 3. And in this video, I'm going to be profiling a little bit of two videos from the Canadian Prepper just to show that biblical prophecy is taking place right before our very eyes. And the first video I'll be going to is titled Emergency Alert, Israeli Nuclear Facility Alert, Mass Evacuation, Iran is mobilizing, USA is going to war. And I'm going to start it off at the 14-minute and 5-second mark. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And the Canadian Prepper is a channel I've been watching for a couple of years now. And, he has a, practical, secular mindset when it comes at looking at geopolitics. But lately, hey, he's been making references to Armageddon, biblical prophecy, the Bible, etc., etc. The other day, he even had a 1948er on there talking about biblical prophecy. So as we get closer and closer to the end, and these prophecies really start to come to fruition right before our very eyes, hey, people can't escape the Bible and the fact that it is the 144% truth out here of the past, the present, and the future. But now let's get into this clip.
I'll say again, I don't understand how a lot of these pundits who right now are calling for World War III over this. Maybe they know something I don't. Many people disagree that if Iran gets into this conflict, which apparently they are because they are issuing recruitment notices for people within their own country, if Iran gets involved, that Russia is going to immediately come to their aid with nuclear weapons. Well, there's problems with this, okay? Number one,
when you understand biblical prophecy, there is no problems with that, because when Israel, the U.S., the NATO, that Western world get into a conflict with Iran, Russia Hey, that means they're getting in a conflict with Russia and China, and Russia is going to be the top ally to protect Iran against the West. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia, the land of Magog. And I believe in a video the other day, the Canadian prepper made a reference to Russia being Gog in the Bible. He said Gog and Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And that's the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back on these Russian Edomites, which we can clearly see. Russia's got that military operation in Ukraine. Russia has helped set up BRICS, a financial alternative to the Western powers. And Russia is constantly making threats to the West in regards to using their nuclear weapons. And hey, Russia will get involved in World War III on the side of Iran. And I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, their military might, soldiers, tanks, fighter jets, S-300, S-400 missile defense systems, helicopters, artillery pieces, etc., etc. This is mainly talking about them being brought down into that Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Russia already does have a military presence in that region, with them having a strong alliance with Syria and helping Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war. All of them handling swords. Now here's the meat of the matter. Verse 5. Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, which Russia and Ethiopia are getting close, and Libya with them. Russia is close with one of the factions in Libya, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, speaking of Turkey, which, regardless of what you see on the surface, Turkey and Russia are allies, and there will come a point in the near future where Turkey is going to completely abandon the West for the East, for Russia. And with this whole situation taking place between Israel and Hamas, it's ignited the Muslim world with Shia and Sunnis, coming together in opposition towards the Israelis and what they know that they're about to do to those Palestinians. And it's got Turkey in a hot seat. You've got Turkey coming out in support of the Palestinians, instead of the 1948ers. All of his bands, the House of Togarmah of the North Quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, your allies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard, a protector unto them. So Gog or Russia is going to be a guard unto Iran when everything's said and done.
They don't have that level of military agreement between the two countries. It's very similar to the mistaken belief, I think, that let's say if one of the Baltic countries gets attacked, or even if Romania has had drones fall on it, as it has in recent nights, that immediately Article 5 will be invoked, and all of a sudden we would go to nuclear war with the Russians over one of these smaller Eastern countries who makes up a small portion of the overall NATO GDP. It's very unlikely. Now, Syria perhaps is a more strategic alliance for the Russians that they may be willing to incrementally engage in Israel, with Israel, in a direct war about. But it's still difficult to say. This is still a proxy war. So if anyone's going to use a nuclear weapon, it's going to be the Israelis. The problem is that as soon as the Israelis use a nuclear weapon, or the United States uses a nuke in their defense, people are going to lose their frickin' minds. And in their use...
And with regards to the use of nuclear weapons, hey, those big boys aren't going to get used until after the charagma, the Markofthebeast in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC CHIP IMPLANT is mandatorily implemented. But hey, we could very well see, a smaller tactical nuke get used, or a dirty bomb. But just remember that them big boys, them mega busters, ain't coming until after Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18 is fulfilled.
Nuclear weapons. Every other country's nuclear DEFCON readiness level goes to the maximum, to the absolute maximum. Because, of course, there are all these overlapping alliances. So the risk then, and maybe this is why a lot of the pundits believe that World War III starts here in the Middle East, perhaps this is just the final flashpoint, the linchpin that will make all of those other conflicts flare up to their maturity, which of course means mushroom clouds. Maybe.
And Apostle Tahar made a very beautiful point. World War III is going to be a bunch of, proxy wars leading up to that final battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So we'll have to wait and see how this situation flares up, if it cools down a little bit or whatever. But just know that with all these situations out here, the situation in Ukraine, China against Taiwan, or whatever, the final battle of World War III, the Battle of Armageddon, will be in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. This is Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, you heathen nations. Prepare war, World War III, nuclear war, the War of Armageddon, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, war against Iran. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And hey, we're seeing a call to arms in that Middle Eastern region right now. Israel has called up reservists, for their, future assault in Gaza. You've got different Arab leaders calling for people to enlist to fight against Israel. Iran's talking about getting involved. The U.S. is moving military forces into that region. And, Russia's got a presence there as well. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Everybody getting on a war footing. Hence why in the news you don't hear any talks of peace. You just hear escalation all over the world and rumors of war, of World War III, nuclear destruction. Let the weak say I am strong. Example of that is what? Iran. Iran knows that they've got Russia and China behind them. And, they've just fielded a hypersonic weapon, I believe called the Fatah, that can reach Israel. So they're feeling themselves. You've got North Korea feeling themselves with their nuclear capabilities, making threats to the West. Hey, Hamas, Hezbollah, these other smaller nations feeling themselves against Israel and the United States. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The United States of America, the State of Israel, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, these other NATO nations out here, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of the Most High, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which again is mainly going to happen after the charagma in Revelation 13 is mandatorily implemented. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shaphat, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go to the first couple of verses of this chapter, you'll see ultimately why these heathens are being gathered down into that region for this battle. So the Most High can judge you and put many of you to death for afflicting the apple of his eye, the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Today, actually, let's go up there since we're here. The nations will be judged, for behold, in those days and in that time, which we're living in these days and times right now, the last days, really the last seconds of the last days, before the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations, chiefly by the biblical Edomites, or these so-called white people, before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven under the children of Israel, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah, the southern kingdom, so-called Negroes, African Americans, blacks, Haitians, West Indians, and Jerusalem, the northern kingdom, your so-called Latinos, Native Americans, the elect from all 12 tribes waking up and coming back to their power, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. Verse 2, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, or Yahweh's Shaphat, Yahweh's judgment, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel. And when you go into that word plead in the Strongs, it's H8199, Shaphat, which in the outline of biblical usage reads to judge, govern, vindicate, punish, to execute judgment, to enter into controversy, plead, have controversy together, to be judged. So again, these heathens are being gathered down into the valley of Jehoshaphat for afflicting the children of Israel. And at the top of that list are you Edomites, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83, the heathen nations that confederated themselves against the children of Israel. And it also mentions Esau twice. It mentions you Amalekite Edomites, who you 1948ers, you small hats over in the Holy Land are. And you had a big hand in the transatlantic slave trade and funding it. Look it up. Look at who owned most of those slave ships. And I will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. The triangular, transatlantic slave trade, taking the southern kingdom from the west coast of Africa to the Americas, and even in the Americas, taking, a lot of the northern kingdom and bringing them to other parts across the planet, and parted my land. The land is parted right now between two heathen squatters, you 1948ers, as well as you Palestinian Arabs who are, Ishmaelites. Neither of you belong there. And hey, you're about to be evicted by nuclear fire during the battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat. Verse 3, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. And what does that sound like? Slavery. And we clearly have historical accounts of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, especially you so-called Negroes, African Americans in the Americas, in hardcore bondage and slavery with chains and fetters of iron around your neck, and boys and girls being sold for wine, guns, and other goods. Elder Yashuamba did a video a couple of months ago showing how there was one, so-called Negro slave, a Judite, who would be brought to different plantations and forced to sleep with hundreds of women in a day just so, they could breed more slaves, have given a boy for an harlot. Now let's jump back down. Verse 12, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near. Slakia. For the day of Yahweh is near, in the Valley of Decision. And when we see these geopolitical events taking place, and we can see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the Valley of Decision. The second woe is past, and the third woe cometh quickly. Now let's go back to this video. I'm going to jump to the 25-minute and 22-second mark.
That notion, because it does appear as though that big moves are being made. Among those big moves is the apparent unification of the Muslim world. Sunni Shiites, the Saudis, and the Iranians. If the Saudis and Iranians team up, Israel is in big, big, big trouble.
Hey, also biblical prophecy, the so-called Muslim world uniting. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 28. Behold, an horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, the Middle East, whereas the nations of the dragons of Arabia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, those other Ishmaelite or Arab nations, shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble at these Arab nations and their military might. And like I said earlier, you've got a lot of different Arab leaders calling for the Muslim world to unite and for people to enlist in the fight against the state of Israel. But remember what the Canadian prepper just said. Saudi Arabia and Iran looks like they're linking up. Also, the Carmanians raging. And when you go into who the Carmanians were, they were Elamites, which those Iranians are, their biblical nationality would be the Elamites as well. And I believe the Carmanian tribes were located in the Persian Empire. So this is talking about Iran. Also, the Carmanians raging in wrath shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, join battle with the dragons of Arabia, the Elamites and the Ishmaelites linking up, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. And this is talking about the modern day spiritual Assyrians, the United States of America. And this can go into the fact that we clearly know that there are Iranian and other sleeper cells in this country, getting ready to be activated and commit acts of terror in retaliation for how the U.S. handles this situation in the Middle East right now. Just recently, you've had a lot of the mainstream media talking about, we're on a high terror alert. There could possibly be a 9/11 style terror attacks due to that whole situation going on between Israel and Hamas and Palestine. And we know that, there are going to be FFs, FALSE, FLAGSs again, to further justify bringing in a state of martial law and stopping free speech and bringing in more draconian laws. But also know that there will be real instances of sleeper cells from these different countries getting activated and committing, assaults in the U.S. And with all these migrants coming in, it's not just, so-called Latinos coming in from south of the border. They found people from Africa coming in, people from the Middle East, China, other nations. Something very big is about to take place in the United States of America and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. And who knows the extent of the nuclear capabilities that Iran has? With Russia being one of their top allies, as well as China, they could be packing some major heat that could reach, the U.S.
Okay, because the Saudis have a lot of money. Of course, there are still American bases in Saudi Arabia. I do believe there's still a few American bases, but all of those American...
Saudi Arabia is going to play a very major big part in the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat.
Bases, I guarantee you, are in the crosshairs of Iranian missiles, and they will likely be laid to waste in the first phase of a conflict. There was a military exercise conducted in the early 2000s. I believe it was.
And also, just recently, Saudi Arabia had a joint naval military drill called Blue Sword with China. And Saudi Arabia is also in talks to join BRICS. So, hey, look, Saudi Arabia, is making moves towards the east from the west.
Operation was a military exercise.
And it'll be very interesting to see the extent of Saudi Arabia and Iran's, relationship in regards to this situation going on right now. But regardless, hey, the Carmanians and the Dragons of Arabia, the Elamites and the Ishmaelites are going to link up to go against the United States of America and the state of Israel. Hey, another example of that was back when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by Donald Trump. You had a lot of Iraqis, mourn the death of Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian general, and had, some solidarity with the Iranians.
A war with Iran is very well known about. They spent like 60 in the early 2000s. I believe it was Operation, was a military exercise. It simulated a war with Iran. Is very well known about. They spent like 60. It was a lot of money that they spent. I think it was over $1 billion. Okay.
And a couple of years ago, I believe it was on my first page, I did a video on this military exercise that the Canadian prepper's talking about, and let's see what the results were.
Something challenge. But anyways, what they found in that is that the American military was defeated in that war game. And typically you would want to impress, typically a lot of these things are done in order to impress the military and the politicians to embolden us to press on into uncharted territory and to go to war with countries for the spoils of war. But in this case, we were defeated, and by a wide margin, asymmetrically, but also with symmetrical forces with and this was back 20 years ago. Iran has advanced a lot since that time. For all we know, they have nuclear weapons.
And that's just talking about Iran against the U.S. How much more do you think with them having Russia or Gog and China in the corner?
So this actually could backfire on the Israelis and the Americans in a big, big way. And this could just be the beginning of the end of the American empire. I mean, we've been saying the beginning of the end of the American empire for some time, but this really could be it. Because if we get smoked in the Middle East...
Hey, we're at the end of the American, really Esau, Edom's rulership as a whole. And, that really began back in the 60s with the so-called moon landing, which, hey, that was an example of a FF. As it says in Job 9, verse 24, the earth was given into the hands of the wicked, not the moon. Hey, but these Edomites have been able to go up into the heavens, into the stars in low orbit space, and set up satellites and space stations. And as it says in Obadiah chapter 1, though thou exalteth thyself as the eagle, though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down. And once Esau got into the first heavens, really the second heavens, more specifically Leo, or low Earth orbit of the second heavens, that was the beginning of the end of his rulership. Because what did you see during the 60s? The so-called Cultural Revolution, where a lot of Esau's institutions were liberalized and feminism was brought about. The sexual revolution, the civil rights, all that shit, which ruined Esau's, how can I put it, so-called, cultural, grip on things. Their conservative, pro-Edomite cultural grip on things, because you saw women coming into the workforce, minorities, and them starting to get demonized for being Edomites and for what their forefathers did, to where you have it today, to where what America originally was, a white Christian nation, is heavily diluted into multiculturalism. And even you've got Edomites going against each other with red versus blue, conservative versus liberal.
Which we could, because, like I say, there's a lot of very intelligent military analysts that I respect that say that the capabilities of Hezbollah should not be underestimated. It's probably part of the reason why, and this is historically as well, Israelis got into fights going into the Gaza Strip before in the past. They've never went in with such a heavy hand as they are now, so things might be different. But if you get Syria, if you get people from Iraq, people from Iran, volunteering for this kind of thing, which it appears there is people volunteering from Iraq. Iran state broadcaster urges people to volunteer for war against Israel. Okay? So the shit's getting ready.
Let's bring that back a little bit.
Fights going into the Gaza Strip before in the past. They've never went in with such a heavy hand as they are now, so things might be different. But if you get Syria, if you get people from Iraq, people from Iran, volunteering for this kind of thing, which it appears.
Hey, the dragons of Arabia, that horrible vision in the east, and the Carmadians also coming and raging like a wild boar and joining in battle with them.
There is people volunteering from Iraq. Iran state broadcaster urges people to volunteer for war against Israel. Okay? So the shit's getting ready to go down. They're even.
Said with this clip, I'm going to go to my last clip with the Canadian prepper titled Late Night Alert, Ceasefire Ends in Hours, Mass Evacuation, Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, into war soon. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And I'm going to start the video at the 5-minute and 25-second mark.
And what has been happening over the last 2 years? You've had BRICS, the emergence of BRICS. BRICS is very important because you've had the Saudis giving the United States the cold shoulder, becoming very cocky about the petrodollar, becoming very flippant about the importance of U.S. international hegemony. And as all of this support in the Middle East is starting to wane, suddenly we have this flare-up of stuff in the Middle East, and all of a sudden you have the movement of military force back.
And also speaking of the BRICS, Ethiopia is in talks to become a member as well. Remember back in Ezekiel 38, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, be thou a guard unto them.
Into the Mediterranean, and this flare-up of stuff in the Middle East, and all of a sudden you have the movement of military force back into the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. It could very well be that the United States situating its military in these regions is just the tip of the spear for what might be coming, setting the stage for some sort of greater presence in the Middle East in order to offset this drift towards the East that the Middle East has been experiencing for the past 2 years.
The United States military presence being dragged back into that Middle Eastern region and built up, also a part of biblical prophecy. This is Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, the North American Army, the United States military, all branches, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, like a desert, that Middle Eastern region, really Western Asia. And the main staging ground for it is going to be Saudi Arabia. And we can see that Saudi Arabia, is having a bigger and bigger presence with this drama taking place in the Middle East right now, with his face toward the East Sea. And when we go to a map of the Middle East, we have Saudi Arabia right here. And what's to the east? The Persian Gulf. And above the Persian Gulf, Iran. And to the northeast, you've got Iraq with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in them. And like Canadian Prepper just said, Hey, there are still military bases in Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. also has a military presence in Iraq. And in the Persian Gulf, you've got the Strait of Hormuz, which, a lot of experts speculate that when war breaks out between the West and Iran, that Iran will cut off the Strait of Hormuz, which would throw oil prices and, the selling of oil into a tailspin. Very juicy region right here. And his hinder part or behind him toward the utmost sea, the Red Sea. What do you got up here? The state of Israel, Syria, Jordan, all that. And his hinder part toward the utmost sea, and his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he had done great things. There's going to be a great slaughter of U.S. military personnel, as well as you other heathens as militaries, when you're gathered down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified, as we can clearly see we are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.